Right, we'll start again. So I'm going to introduce you to Helen. Sorry about that, Helen. That's a really bad,
No, that's
really bad
okay.
intro there. So I'm going to introduce you to Helen. Helen is our HR expert. Do you want to say hello, Helen? Just give everybody a little bit of background about who you are and what you do.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Really nice to meet you, even though I can't see you. So my company is the Personnel Partnership. It's a HR and learning and development consultancy with offices in Lindley and Huddersfield. I've been operating for 19 years and provide HR and L&D support to lots of SMEs across the Yorkshire region. And Stuart is my fabulous accountant.
Thank you. Before we get into the questions, Helen, I just want to let everybody know that everybody at the moment is in listen-only mode, so we can't hear you if you say anything. However, you can put any questions you've got in the chat box. What we will be doing is, as we're going through stuff, we will be pausing and we'll be taking questions and passing those over to Helen as we go through. So if you've got any questions, just stick them either in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and we will we'll answer them as we go. So Helen, fairly big announcements on Thursday night, and
Yes,
some more detail
yes,
about furloughing,
yes,
etc.
yes.
And a few things that sort of changed from what we'd thought before.
Yeah.
Just to summarise, who can we claim for on furlough?
So anybody that was in payroll on can't say it, PAYE on the 28th of February. And that's really key. That's one of the most key things that's in place, because I've had queries from clients. What about people who have started at the beginning of March? You know, I've only employed someone for 10 days. Can they be furloughed? No, they're not eligible for the scheme. So had to be on payroll as at 28th of February.
Okay, and that covers full-timers, part-timers?
Yeah, everybody, even people that you've got on 0 hours. So even 0 hours workers who we didn't think were eligible to start off with, they are now. As long as they're going through the PAYE system, then they're fine.
Okay. What do we do if somebody's currently on sick?
Okay, so if someone's currently in receipt of SSP, then sickness kind of trumps everything generally, as a rule of thumb in employment law. So if someone's currently sick, they're currently sick. What the government haven't done is sort of thought about how all these things are going to square away. So, for example, if someone's who you've furloughed then becomes sick, if someone's sick at the moment and you want to furlough them, the government's not really thought this through in terms of both sides meeting up and everything joining up. So I would suggest being as practical about it as you can be. So if someone's off sick at the moment, because maybe they're self-isolating and they've got a self-isolation note and that might run out in a week or so, and you need to furlough that person, then obviously you need to seek agreement to furlough that person. And I would suggest that you do it once they've are eligible to come back to work, as it were. So I think that's the first point. If you furlough someone and they then go off sick, you probably don't want to know about that, because that's a whole load of faff. And it's better for the employee, unless you operate a company sick pay where they're eligible for 100% of their pay. It's better for the employee to be furloughed, isn't it? So you need to maybe take a view on what you want to do, or what you want to ask employees to do in terms of notification if they are sick. It's something that you just need to think about.
Yeah, very, very good point. Very good point. I picked up that there was a 3-week period for furloughing. That's how it's going to work in 3-week cycles. What do you know about that?
Yeah, it is, which is brilliant news for us, because in our HR professional circles, we were having big debates about, can we turn it on, can we turn it off, how do we cope with it? And the government clarified for us that you have to be furloughed for a minimum of 3 weeks. So we know that now, that's clear. So if you furlough someone, it's 3 weeks, no less than 3 weeks. But then they can come back to work if there's work for them to do, and then you can furlough them again. So if you've got a situation where you've got a number of employees doing similar jobs, I guess that what you could do is share that around a little bit. in terms of maybe furlough part of your team for 3 weeks and then bring them back, and then furlough another part of your team for 3 weeks. That seems to be what a lot of clients were wanting to do, to try and share it. Because obviously when people are furloughed, you have a choice. You either pay them 100% of their pay, but you're not obligated to do so. What you can claim back from the government is 80%. So for example, a lot of my clients are just going to pay people 80% and claim back the 80%, because obviously that's a big issue for them in terms of finance, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the 3 week thing is great, because it gives us that clarification. It won't necessarily be helpful in all businesses, but from what I'm hearing for the majority of my clients, it's a little bit of something to share around if they can. If you want to furlough someone for 3 months, you can furlough them for 3 months. It's not a problem at all if you have no work for them. And I think this is a good point in which to perhaps bring this in. Perhaps just let me talk through the furlough process.
Go for it.
So first of all, if you have no work for somebody at all, no work, that's when you can access the furlough scheme. So it has to be that when they are furloughed, they do no work for you whatsoever. So it's not a case of furloughing them and then saying, oh, can you maybe do a few emails? Can I just send this bit of work to you? Could you maybe pick up this project at home, but you're still getting 80% of your pay? That's not the point of the furlough scheme. It's people you would otherwise be laying off if you have a layoff or short-time working clause in your contract, or those people who you would be making redundant. It's for those people only. And when you furlough someone, it's not a case of just doing it, as I've heard this morning, as other HR professionals are telling me. You have to get their agreement. It has to be a consultation, although it can be fairly quick and dirty, to be honest. It's not like a long drawn out redundancy consultation. So you have to consult with the employee, and you have to get their signed agreement via a furlough agreement, a letter, call it whatever you want. And that's how you do the furlough process.
Okay, good. So just to summarise, so furloughing essentially would be you've got nothing for them to do.
Yep.
They do nothing when they're at home. They cannot access emails, work, do anything.
No.
And they would otherwise be made redundant, and it applies to everybody who was on payroll at the 28th of Feb. So if you started on the 1st of March, you don't qualify.
You fall between the cracks, unfortunately. I mean, it might be helpful for me to address that as well, because again, I've had a few clients, 2 or 3, have said to me, well, what about this person who's just started? What do I do with them? I was speaking to a client this morning, alone, who said, well, what do I do with this person? So you've got a few options, really. You either take the commercial view that, sorry, you've fallen through the cracks and I can't do anything with you. I have no work for you. Therefore, I'm going to have to terminate your employment. You've only been with me for 10 days. You're not entitled to any redundancy payment or anything like that. You need to have 2 years service before you're entitled to redundancy. Or you could maybe agree with them a period of unpaid leave. So they'll stay on your books. Don't forget, they'll be accruing continuous service, accruing holiday entitlement. All of those things will accrue if you keep them on the books. But you could keep them on the books, not pay them, agree that you won't pay them, and perhaps review in a month's time, 2 months' time, 3 months' time. It's an option for you. Or you could pay them some money. So you could pay them. So you could always pay 80% of salary, but you just can't claim it back from the government. You could pay them 50% of salary, 20% of salary. You can pay them 10%, 5%, pay them whatever you like. Maybe they'll be glad of something, but of course you won't be able to claim it back.
Is that let's as you say, 10%, 20% of salary or whatever? Is that something that has to be agreed between the two of you then? Because presumably that's not in line with your employment contract, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely not in line with your employment contract. But I guess what you'd be doing otherwise is saying to this person, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to terminate your employment. And of course, you'd need to do that in accordance with the contract. So if that person, you were basically giving that person a week's notice, then obviously you'd have to give them notice. It depends what it says in the contract of employment, and maybe all contracts are slightly different. So it could be that you come to an agreement with that person that whilst I cannot furlough you and I have no work for you to do, but maybe I could pay you 50% salary, 25% salary for a month, and then we could review the situation and see where we are. That's if you want to retain that person, because you might have put a lot of time and effort into recruiting them. And you know, that's a cost as well, isn't it? So if you don't want to go through that again, that's another option to do that. So just, you know, see what's going to be best for your business, what you can afford, what's going to be the better option, and take it from there, I think.
Okay, cool. I did read that whilst you can't do any work while you're on furlough, you can do training.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I had this with a client last week. So what you can do is you can't do any work, or you basically can't earn any money for your employer. You can't do any service for your employer, but you could maybe do some training. So a typical person that this would be for is perhaps an apprentice, you know, who maybe can carry on with their training. And that's a good option, you know, so you could do that. That's absolutely no problem. But what is clear is that you can't do work, and that is really clear.
Yeah, cool. I've got a couple of questions that are flying in now, Helen. So shall we take a pause and just answer some questions?
Yeah.
What if someone had a pay rise on the 1st of April? Which salary would you use, the 28th of Feb or the April one?
I'd probably go for the 28th of Feb. Is that what you think, Stuart?
I think the same, yeah. I think we should almost pause pay rises, because I think HMRC in particular are looking at, shall we say, anti-abuse measures. And I think spotting a pay rise in March or April and paying out an 80% on a bigger number is just going to immediately wave a flag to them that could be a potential. And we have a few clients who do pay rises on the 1st of April every year. And I'm sort of, I personally would suggest that we perhaps put those pay rises on pause until, and I presume that's something we can do by negotiation, isn't it?
I think that's a good idea, because obviously, you know, a pay rise might be an issue as well to you as a business. You know, all of a sudden the pay rise from the 1st of April was fine, but it might be an issue to you now in terms of your cash flow, particularly, you know, if it's 2 or 3 people and you're a relatively small business. So yeah, I would definitely communicate with that person and say, you know, look, this is what we'd planned. This is where we are. Is it okay with you if we do X, Y, or Z? I think that's a good idea. There is an issue around if people have variable pay and what you do in terms of variable pay, which might be a good idea to mention this now. So
yeah, go for it.
You might have seen in the guidance, the government guidance, where you can do an average, or you can go back to last year's, the 1920 payroll, and look at what people earned at this time last year, or you can do an average. So there's lots of different options available for you in terms of what you pay people, if you like, in terms of calculating the 80%.
Next question. Well, this is an interesting one, Alice. Can you can you fail probation period if employee is on furlough?
Yes, absolutely. So you've got someone on probationary period, I presume, and probationary periods usually last 3 months, sometimes 6 months. So I guess it depends where you are in that cycle. So if you know already that someone is not going to pass their probationary period and you've spoken to them about it, then my suggestion would be to probably look at dismissing them in terms of an unsuccessful probation before you even put them on furlough, because once they're on furlough, you're bound to be paying them 80%, aren't you? So if you can maneuver yourself out of that situation, I think that's probably going to be a better option. But if you're furloughing someone and they are still in their probationary period, and obviously they're not doing any work for you, what might be another option is to actually extend their probationary period beyond the furlough period. So depends how long they're going to be furloughed for. But if they're furloughed for 3 months and you've still got a month of the probationary period left, then when they come back to work at the end of the 3 months, they've got a final month on probation. So I guess it depends where you are in that probationary cycle, and what you can do, basically. What
Yeah,
you can practically do.
Yeah, I think that's a good call as well, isn't it? Because you could, as you say, you could have somebody who drops over that probation period and comes out the other side.
Yeah.
So the next one, Caroline asks, could you ask employees to do CPD?
Yeah, continuing professional development. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they have to do CPD as part of their job role anyway, like a lot of us professional people do, and you know, if you need to be I don't know, accountant, HR professional, sure, there are lots of other businesses out there and lots of other professions where you have to do CPD. There's no reason why not, because what we need is for people to remain up to date, don't we? So that when we do get past this and we all come back, that they can hit the ground running. So I don't see why that should be a problem.
Yeah, that counts to me like training. It just goes under training, doesn't it? It's,
yeah.
Next one from John. Are monthly commissions included in the 80%?
Yeah. Now let me just double check. It says I'm just reading from the government guidance, just to be clear, any fees, commissions and bonuses are not included. So that's in terms of what you can claim back. Yeah, not that you wouldn't necessarily pay that to an employee, but it's just in terms of what you can claim back. So if someone's owed a commission and you would ordinarily be paying them a commission, I think you're probably still contractually bound to pay that commission, depends what it says in your contract, but you cannot claim that back as part of the 80%.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. So the 80% that you can claim back is gross salary, excluding bonuses, commissions, etc., and coming off that the employee's NI and tax as well, up to that maximum of 2,500 that everybody's talking about. It is the gross salary of 2,500.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you can claim employers' national insurance and the employer's pension contribution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's the minimum auto enrolment pension contributions.
It is, yeah.
So if you pay more, obviously you can't claim that back.
So you see 3% then, isn't it? It's got some real calculations going on at the end of April and May.
I'm glad I'm not an accountant. Or a payroll person.
Yeah, we're going to have fun at the end of April. Next question, from Andrew, if I understand you correctly, you can furlough and top up to full pay.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, and then he's asked a supplementary question. Holiday entitlement, I understand unused holiday entitlement can be carried forward up to 2 years.
Yeah, that's right. So yes to your first question, you can top up to 100% if you want to do. Some of my clients are doing it, not many, but some are. And some have said, another good point here, some have said, well, I'll do it now for the moment, but I might want to go to 80%. I can afford it now, but I might not be able to afford it in 2 months' time. So if that's your situation, make sure that you write that in your furlough agreement, that you reserve the right to reduce the 100%. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one was annual leave, wasn't it? So narrative came out from the government on Friday saying that employees can carry forward the 4 weeks leave. So we get 5.6 weeks, 28 days. 20 plus the 8 bank holidays, 5.6 weeks. So the government have said you can carry 4 of those weeks forward for 2 years. Now there's loads of commentary around, well, do we have to allow? That won't work for us as a business, daddy. So even though the government are allowing you to do that, because at the moment you're not allowed to carry forward 4 weeks leave. So if the government are allowing us to do that, it's just that they're allowing us to do that. As a business, you don't have to allow everybody to do it. So what I'm suggesting to clients is that we just think canny about it, because what we don't want is for people to be furloughed, accruing annual leave, and then come back to work and immediately want to take the annual leave, because who knows, but 3 or 4 months time we're into the sort of summer period, aren't we, when we've probably already got some holidays booked. So people will already have booked holiday. We don't want everybody to take loads of leave as soon as they come back. So that's why the government said, don't worry, employers, it's okay. We can allow them to carry it forward for up to a period of 4 years. But if it makes sense for them not to do that, then that's fine. You just need to think operationally how that will work.
Yeah, it is important, is that, because we've got a number of people who will be, it's the projects will be on pause, not on cancel. So that time period at the back end of the year, they could be really, really busy. And you might end up with a situation where everybody's then wanting to ram the holidays in, and you end up recruiting a load of freelancers to cover for those holidays, and it actually ends up costing you a lot more at the back end of the year because everything's been pushed back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So next question: will the living wage rises still happen in April?
I haven't heard anything that tell me not.
No, I haven't either. So I suspect the answer to that is yes, as it stands at the moment.
Yeah.
Right, we've got some more on here. When a staff member is furloughed, this is Julie, when a staff member is furloughed, could they opt out of the pension to give them more monthly money, bearing in mind that they are not allowed a rise in pay from the Feb payroll, and opting out would raise their salary slightly? Also, do student loans get put on hold during furlough?
Well, I haven't heard anything about student loans not being deducted. Have you, Stuart?
No, not at all. No. I think they just carry on as normal.
Yeah. And in terms of the opting out of the pension, I think people can opt out if they want to, can't they? Don't they have an option to opt out?
They do. I think it's a little bit difficult. It's because when auto enrolment came in, everybody, there was a strong thing where, as an employer, you were not allowed to encourage employees to opt out of auto enrolment. So yes, an employee can opt out of the pension for a period of time and then opt back in 3 months if they want. And you're right, it will increase the salary. It's just sort of difficult. It's going to be difficult not to have the direct conversation and look like you're leading employees. That's going to be the hard bit for you. But in principle, Julie, yes, they can. Another one from Ellis. What about the 1st of April rises to minimum wages set out by the government? As we understand it, Ellis, unless you, and I think this follows on from one of the previous questions, Helen, I think the minimum wage rises are still coming in. But I'm not sure how, if you're using the payroll as at the 28th of February, you apply the minimum wage rise. I don't think anybody's quite clear on that yet.
No, I think what's happened is the government have brought out this guidance, and you know, let's be clear, this is guidance that they've brought out. You know, it hasn't, some of the stuff hasn't gone into statute yet. So all we can do, what I'm saying to clients is, look, all we can do is what we can do, and if we subsequently found that we've got it wrong, we'll just have to put it right, because we just don't know enough about some of the stuff to be able to take a clear decision. So we're kind of winging it a bit with some of the things. And you're right in terms of the national minimum wage and national living wage, and
I think, unfortunately, by the time that they've written the legislation, we'll be out. Not unfortunately, fortunately, by the time they've written the legislation, we'll be out the other side of this. At the moment, what we've got is one page of A4, isn't it? It's not. It's no more than that, and everybody's doing their best to interpret it. I think as an accounting industry and as an HR industry, if we can interpret consistently across as much of the industry as we can, then at least if we've got it wrong, we've all got it wrong. And there's you know, and as you say, we can go back and correct, but we just say it wasn't just us trying to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's us and 1,000 other professionals have also made the same assumptions.
Yeah, exactly.
So Alex asks, the scheme says it covers up to £2,500 of employee wage costs. We pay a basic salary and a car allowance through PAYE. Would the scheme 80% be the total of these?
I've asked about car allowances, and this is one of the things that's just not clear really, because but what the government have said is, and I'll just refer to my little note here, fees, commissions and bonuses are not included in terms of what you can claim back. So I assume with your person that has a car allowance that you've got an agreement in place with them. Maybe it's a contractual right in terms of their car allowance. And if that's the case, then I think you have to pay it. You just won't be able to claim it back.
Yeah, I think the idea behind that is it says their regular wage of £2,500. So yeah, unclear. I think that one is, I'm afraid, there, Alex. Steve has asked, I've read you cannot do training if it is a requirement. The government website says, however, if workers are required to, for example, complete online training courses whilst they are furloughed, then they must be paid at least the national minimum wage for the time spent training, even if this is more than the 80% of their wage that will be subsidised. That's absolutely right. Yeah, if you've got somebody training, you've got to, from what I've read in the rules, if you've got somebody on furlough and by dropping their wage to 80%, if it takes them below the national minimum wage, you do not have to top up.
That's right.
However, if they are training, you do have to top it up to national minimum wage levels. How on earth you're going to do that in terms of the time that they spend training versus the time that they don't spend training, I've really no idea how we'll do that. I suppose really to apply it, you've got to have a significant proportion of the time training. So if it's a day's training or something like that, it's going to be very, very difficult to.
Yeah, I agree.
To actually administer that. Okay. There's a few questions coming in about directors. We're going to cover directors in a few minutes. We're covering team first, and then we'll cover directors in a little while. Question from Steve. In simple terms, can you explain how we work this out? You can claim a grant from HMRC to cover wages for a furloughed employee equal to the lower of 80% of an employee's regular salary, or £2,500 per month, plus the associated employer national insurance contributions and minimum automatic enrolled pension contributions are paid on that wages. Yes, Steve, and this afternoon I will also be sharing with you, we've put together a little furlough calculator which you'll be able to apply to your individual payroll and your people, and it will work out what the saving is off your payroll costs by doing furloughing them and what grant you should get back from HMRC. And the way it works is the £2,500 is the employee's gross wage, and so they will pay. You would not, as you would normally do, you'll deduct tax and national insurance off them. Your £2,500 or your 80% is that gross wage, so it includes the tax deductions as well. And then on top of that, you can also claim back the employer's NIC, and you'll be able to claim back your 3% pension contributions that you've made as an employer as well. I think that answers that one. If it doesn't, Steve, just put another question in and we'll catch up on that one. From Ellis, does it include apprentices? Yeah, I think so, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. We've another question here. My business is a bar. I want to open a virtual bar. It won't be to raise any money, but just to keep people entertained by people contributing free content. Am I okay to do if furloughed? I think not, is the answer to that.
Virtual bar? Oh, I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but even if it's free content, yeah, I mean it's very clear that if you're furloughed, you can't do work. Let me just refer to something. Just bear with me a second.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the government guidance just so that we can clearly get the information on this. It says in the guidance that came out on Friday, employees can carry out training and do volunteer work, provided that they do not provide a service or make any money for their employer. So I don't know whether what you're suggesting, whether that falls under that.
You see, the volunteer work, I don't think it means volunteer work, volunteering to work for your business, does it? I'd sense that means more.
Yeah, that's the NHS volunteer stuff.
Yeah,
how
NHS.
I read it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
NHS and
yeah,
charity volunteering rather than.
yeah.
So so please don't think we'll furlough them all and then we'll get them to volunteer in the business, because that would be
No.
completely breaking the
Agreed.
furlough agreement
Agreed.
rules.
Yeah.
Caroline, could you ask employees to do a 3-week block of furlough, then take a week's holiday, and then go on furlough again?
Yep, Caroline, I don't see why not. You just have to look at if there's anything in your contract in terms of how much notice you have to give employees for holiday. It probably doesn't say anything in your contract, to be fair, because it's probably the other way around in the notice that employees have to give you for holiday. It probably doesn't say what notice you have to give them if you want them to take holiday. So the statutory backstop would be double the length. So if you want employees to go on holiday for a week, you have to give them double the length of notice, so 2 weeks. So I don't see any reason why not. You might get some dissenters because of this new stuff that's coming around. We can carry 4 weeks of the holiday forward, into the next 2 years. So you might get some dissenters about that. But if that works out better for your business, So just be careful about making sure you give them the statutory minimum notice.
Okay, so the next one, what are the consequences of an employee found to be providing services? We don't know, is the honest answer. I haven't seen anything which says exactly what will happen. I think, there will be some anti-avoidance stuff coming out from HMRC, I'm absolutely sure. And I don't know what that will look like. I suspect it'll include fines and penalties. And I would have thought, because of the nature of why this support and help has been introduced, those fines and penalties will be severe, I would guess. I say just in relation to why we're doing this in the first place. Unless you know anything different, Helen.
No, I don't. I mean, if you're talking about what would happen if, you got employees to do some work when they were furloughed, I think it's just what Stuart said, basically. Yeah.
I think also with you've probably got to watch that even if HMRC didn't catch you out early doors, then there's also a consequence if later down the line that you may fall out with that employee or whatever, and they decide then to go and take you into some sort of tribunal or courtroom or something like that. Then
they might blow the whistle. There might be a whistleblower.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's a statutory thing that employees can do. They don't need any service to blow the whistle. So even if you've got someone who haven't got 2 years service and they decide to blow the whistle on you to HMRC because of what did or didn't happen during a period of furlough, then you're in a sticky situation.
Wayne's question: what will the final salary to someone if the full 2,500 is claimed? Is this taxed? And what that? I think we've already covered that one, Wayne. With the 2.5 is the gross salary that you're paying them, plus the employer's NI on top and the pension. And yes, if you're paying them 2,500, it is taxed. So there is tax to come off that. Got a couple here. Following on from that, actually, somebody's asked, what practical measures do we need to undertake to ensure employees don't break the rule? We're already disabling their VPN connections, diverting calls, and disabling their mobiles. I don't think you can do much more than that, really, can you? You've got to be a pretty determined employee.
I don't think that you can. I think maybe just a clear communication, in terms of, during your period of furlough, you are not required to do any work for us, or we do not require you, or you must not, or you will not, or whatever words fit your culture best. Make sure that you write that into the agreement.
The scheme is a minimum of 3 weeks. Does this mean we have to furlough our employees in multiple blocks of 3 weeks, or can we bring them back, say, after 4 or 8 weeks on the scheme?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's got to be a minimum of 3, but if you furlough someone for 4 weeks or 8 weeks, that's fine.
So I think that means as well, if you furlough somebody for 3, bring them back for a week, you've then got to furlough them for another 3, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you've got to think about how this is going to affect you operationally.
But once you've done it, you just leave them there. It's not blocks of 3, is it? It's minimum of 3.
It's minimum, yeah.
Yeah. Next question from Steve. Big question is, does at the end of May, the big question is, does this end at the end of May, i.e. furlough workers effectively only get 2 months? I think the current offering ends at the end of May. However, I suspect if we're in a similar position by mid-May, they'll just extend it, I would have thought, wouldn't they?
That's what I'm reading. Yeah, the whole of March, the whole of April, the whole of May, possible extension is where I've read that somewhere on a government website. But yeah.
I think there's a bit of interpretation over that as well, because they said a period of 3 months and they launched it on the 20th of March, so everybody assumed it lasted till the 20th of June, and then they talked about backdating it to the 1st of March. And it's probably worth us just spending a minute or so on this backdating. I don't know whether you want to say something about this backdating to the 1st of March bit, or
no, you go for it if you've got
My understanding is you can only furlough somebody from the date that you agreed to furlough them. The 1st of March was put in there as a backstop for anybody who'd made somebody redundant between the 1st of March and the 20th of March, that you could actually go back, put them back onto your payroll. So if they've already been made redundant, you can add them back onto your payroll and put them under the furlough agreement from whatever date that was. And they just made 1st of March being the cutoff. So if you didn't furlough anybody until today, you cannot claim anything back to the 1st of March.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to be absolutely clear on that one. Okay, have we got any more questions? These questions are flowing nice and thick. Is there a portal we go to claim the 80% back? Not yet. The HMRC plan is that portal will be live by the end of April. Now, me with my experience of HMRC hat on says that I think it'll be at least the end of April by the time that portal is ready. It's a big undertaking, big development project. HMRC's got a lot on to try and get everything in place. I think it'll be something simple when we do get there. And as soon as it's launched, there will be hundreds of thousands of applications going in, which means that it's going to be a bit flaky, and trying to get your application through is going to be hard work. So I would say don't expect to see any money back from this until towards the end of May, I think would be safer. So I think when you're building your cash flow projections out, build out that you've got to pay 80% salaries at the end of April, and then you'll get the refund at some point towards the end of May. If it comes any earlier, brilliant. Count that as a bonus. But I think if you do it that way, you're being quite pragmatic on your cash flow. As I say, anything else then will be a bonus. Have we covered nearly all the questions? Just give me 2 seconds just to check to make sure we've got all the questions covered so far. We've one employee that has, unprompted by us, volunteered to work for us without any pay until the end of May. How does that work contractually? Results, I would have said.
Yeah, how strange, how wonderful, but how strange. Yes. And I guess I'd go back one step on this one, because that if there's no work for them, they're entitled to be furloughed, but they don't have to accept the furlough. If you pushed a furlough agreement across a desk to them or spoke to them on the phone, they might say, no, I don't want to be furloughed. So what's the alternative? There's that potential layoff if it's in your contract, or redundancy. So if they're saying, no, I don't want to be furloughed and I'm happy to do it for no pay, then I think that's fine. Yeah, I think you're in clover there. But as ever, and being a HR person, I would get that in writing and do a letter back to them to say, this is what we offered you in terms of furlough. You didn't want to agree to that. This is what you said you'd do. This is what we've agreed. And I'd just make sure that I had it all in writing, and get the person to sign as well, to say that, yeah, that's what I've said, that's what I've agreed, just to cover you, basically. Just make sure you're doing a robust approach to it.
Okay, I've got one more here which says, are there any furlough templates available?
There are lots of furlough agreements going round, for sure. I've seen one of my local law firms will give you one for £250, which is a sizable figure. Yeah, it's fairly simple and straightforward to put one together. You know, you just need a few things on there: the date the person's going to be furloughed, excuse me, what you're going to pay them in terms of the furlough, you know, the 80%, the 100%, what you're going to use as their salary, are you going to use an average, that kind of thing. Make sure that they know that they can't work for you during the period of furlough. You know, so it's sort of fairly simple to pull one together, but I don't have a template I can send you.
Okay, cool. I think we'll just move on. I've had a lot of questions coming in about how does it work for directors.
Sure.
And there is nothing. The first thing to say is anything we talk about now to do with directors, there is very little actually being put into the government guidance so far. So a lot of this we've picked up from other places. So the government guidance does say that directors can be furloughed. Now, as Helen said right at the beginning, that creates a bit of an issue for single. So if you've got two directors in a company, you could very easily furlough one of them and they do no work whatsoever for the company. If you do that, most people are paying the salary £8,500 a year, so that will get you 575 quid back at the end of May for the month that they weren't doing anything. That's all that's included in the government guidance so far. So what happens with single director companies, which a lot of you are single director companies? Well, the CBI and the Treasury did a web broadcast over the weekend where they've said as long as the activities of the director are restricted to their statutory obligations, which means making sure the accounts are filed, making sure the VAT returns are filed, and making sure the payroll returns are filed, and nothing else, then they could still be furloughed. So if you just make sure your statutory obligations are met and therefore the company doesn't end up getting fined, and do nothing else, so no promotion of the business, no Facebook posts, no emails, then you could be furloughed. Now, that's not written into the government website as of yet, and that's just something the Treasury have published. I would like to think that the Treasury aren't saying something that then is not converted into government guidance. However, whether it's converted from Treasury speak into government guidance word for word, or whether there's some changes in there somewhere on the plate, we don't really know yet. I guess the truth is we can't do anything until April payroll anyway, and we probably can't do anything until May payroll on directors. So it's not as much of a, I guess, mass need to do something today with it as it is as much as it is for team members, because team members, you've got to produce and give them the agreement. It's going to be a bit difficult for you to give an agreement for you to sign yourself. That I don't know how that works, because you're signing it on both sides of the on both sides of the equation. But at the moment, the Treasury have said you can furlough a single director company if you're doing no work at all apart from your statutory obligations. And that's as much as we know at the moment. And I think that covers all the directors' questions that we were asked. So are we going to discuss furlough options for one director and two director companies? I think we've just done that. In particular, interested to know, do you have a written employment contract? And if no, can one be done retrospectively? You don't need employment contracts for directors, Mark. I think you might create more. Can you still get a dividend if you are furloughed? Yes, I would think you can, because dividend income is classed as investment income. The only thing that I would watch there, Rob, is that if you're furloughed and the business is generating no income, are we sure that there's going to be enough profits there to take a dividend? So you can't claim. Hang on, sorry, that's questions popping up and it keeps rolling on for me. So you can't claim dividends or a figure based on profit like the self-employed do. No, you can't get a figure based on profit like the self-employed do. You could still take a dividend from the company as long as there's enough profit there. So that's investment income, and that's completely outside of everything that the government have done. Michael, who was the bar, said, further to my last message, could I set up a new company just to run the virtual bar? Could I go ahead? I wouldn't put myself into a furlough or claim. I don't think that would. I think that would just be too. I don't see any. I'll have a separate conversation with you about that, Michael. But I don't see. I don't see any real benefit in doing that. Claire, for directors in furlough, will it be actioned via the payroll system? Your payroll will just run as normal. The 80% claim has to be put through a HMRC portal, which doesn't yet exist. Is the answer to that, Claire? And as soon as it does exist, I'm sure we'll be putting lots of claims through, but at the moment it doesn't exist, so we can't claim anything back as of yet. And do you know what? I've run out of questions now, Helen.
Oh, yay.
Anybody, I'm gonna pause just for 30 seconds just to see if anybody else has got any more questions. If you have, get them in now, guys.
Have you looked on the Q&A as well, Stuart? Because I
have.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, I think
I've not opened it, but
yeah, we've got quite a few in there, but I've covered all of those. So we've talked about limited company directors, pay rises. Yeah. So no more questions coming through. So I'm going to assume we're all done. Is there anything that we didn't cover today, Helen, that you thought we should?
I don't think so. I think we've covered the main points.
No questions you've been asked this week. You were expecting me to ask this question. I didn't.
No. I don't even know what day it is, let alone what questions I've been asked. We've had that many. They've been coming thick and fast. Yeah, I've had quite a lot of questions around self-isolating and all that malarkey. But yeah, I think we've covered all the key furlough ones, to be fair. I mean, if everybody's asked their questions, that's brilliant. I can't think of anything that we haven't covered, because I've gone through how to do a furlough, what needs to be in the agreement, and we've asked and answered a lot of questions around the process. So I think I'm okay.
Cool. There have just been a couple landed here, which Claire asks, I know some directors are applying for universal credit. Why would you do that? Wouldn't you just wait for furlough? It depends on people's circumstances. I think you've also got to be in a position where you would qualify for universal credit. And I don't know a massive amount about the benefit system, but I think if you've got any savings or any assets, etc., it will restrict how much you could claim through that route anyway. So I don't know what's on offer there. You'd have to stop taking a payroll from your company. And again, I don't know what the processing times are like. I don't know how much money you get out of that. So I'm not sure whether it would be worth doing or not anyway. Nikki asks, are the government likely to announce anything additional for directors? As we know at the moment, we don't think there's anything coming more, but we don't know for definite. We do know there's been a petition going round wanting more support for directors to put us on a parity with self-employed, but as it stands, it's a petition. It hasn't gone any further than that. Leslie asks a cracking question here. Does watching this count as work? Yeah, I think it probably does. I think it probably does. Although, yeah. James asks, how would furlough work if it straddles paternity leave?
Okay. So is that a person who is going to be furloughed and then go on paternity leave? Does it say any more to it?
It just says, how would furlough work if it straddles paternity leave? James, do you want to just clarify that question? I'll ask a couple more and then come back to it if you just want to pop in some clarification about that. Bev, she was the one who had the employee who wanted to work for free. She says here, it's referring to the employee who wants to work for free. It's not advisable. We have put together a contract variation so she's earning something. Good. But she had said she, in essence, is going to work hours at her own cost. I think if you've got a contract variation, it just goes back to what you said before, doesn't it, Helen? Michael, where is the petition? It's online. I've probably got a link to it somewhere in a Facebook group or something, so I'll happily share it with you if you want. Rob, so if you're a director and you have other income such as property and that's been hit, can you claim as self-employed? Good question. It's got to be there's got to be a big enough proportion of your income coming through as self-employed income before you can claim for that. And I don't think property income counts as self-employed income. I'd need to double check it, but I'm fairly sure when I read it, rental doesn't count as self-employed income unless it makes up more than 50% of your total income or something like that. There are some rules around that, but I'll have to read that one separately for you, Rob. I have an employee who is furloughed from Tuesday the 17th and has just had a little girl on Friday last week. How does paternity impact this scenario?
Well, remember, you have to be furloughed for 3 weeks in order for you to be able to claim something back. So, and if it was furloughed from the 17th, I'm not sure what date it was on Friday, but I don't think that's 3 weeks, is it?
No.
No, it's not. So, I mean, I guess the question is, what do you offer in terms of your paternity leave? Do you offer statutory minimum? It's a tricky one, isn't it? Maybe think about what you might want to do with the employee, because if you furlough him, you've already furloughed him and he has to be furloughed for 3 weeks for you to be able to claim that back. If you only offer statutory minimum in terms of your paternity leave, he'd be getting a lot less than the 80% of furlough. So it might be in your interest and his interest for him to continue to be furloughed as opposed to take separate paternity leave.
Good call. James, looking for this is the guy who asked the question about paternity and furloughing. I think you've just answered that with Wayne's answer. Looking to furlough a staff member that their baby is due in a few weeks. We've already agreed 2 weeks paternity leave. I'd look at what you just said there about furlough versus paternity. Would looking for a new contract not be allowed if you are a furlough director? I think looking for a new contract would not be allowed if you're a furlough director, Mark, because that's not part of the statutory obligations of running the company. You are then promoting and actively looking for new business. And I do think, that doesn't just apply if you're looking for contract work. I think that applies to every director. We probably need to consider, is it better to be furloughed, just do the statutory stuff, and claim the £575 a month for what it looks like at the moment will only be 2 months, so 1,100-1,200 quid, or is it better to be out there looking to bring work in and looking to be working on work and getting work done? Because are we going to be better off than the 1,100-1,200 quid that's on offer? Matt, we've got a chap who's had a child last week. The child's quite sick. So we said for him to take as much paternity as he wants. Then this came along. What's best to do?
If there's no work for him, furlough him, I'd say. I'm just, perhaps not giving you the advice I should, but I think we've got to be practical about it. And if his child's ill, that's such a terrible situation. So, is it better for you and him for him to be furloughed? I mean, in terms of when you've said he can take as much paternity leave as he wants, I don't know what you're paying him in terms of that leave, because obviously statutorily you're only entitled to 2 weeks paternity leave at the rate of SMP, which is 140 something. So, you know, it might be better in this situation to, if you feel it's appropriate and relevant, to furlough him.
Have SCA rules been relaxed on reporting non-payments to credit reference agencies? Not as yet, Bev. So if you don't make a payment on a finance agreement, whether that be a loan or a mortgage, it will show up on your credit record. There is a lot of pressure being put on at the moment to find some way. So whilst that goes there, there's some flag or indicator, or how they're going to do it, I have no idea, to try and make it so it has no impact on your actual credit rating, but it still will note as a missed payment. Bez also asked, as Furlough director, can you keep an eye on your accounts in Xero? Probably. There's, I would say keeping an eye on your accounts is part of your statutory obligation. I think if you're processing transactions through Xero, I think that's doing work, if I'm honest. So I think just keeping an eye on that you're making enough profit. So if you've got somebody else who's not furloughed doing that work, and you're just reviewing it at the end of the month to make sure everything's as it should be, and you can therefore comply with your statutory obligations, I think that probably does it. It's really grey though. Please don't take that as being gospel advice. We're just interpreting what a very brief announcement was made over the weekend. As a director in Furlough, do you continue to take a salary? Then once the government portal is open, you can apply to get 80% of it paid retrospectively. Is that correct? That's absolutely correct, Clay. Continue to take your salary, and then you claim 80% of it back once the portal is open. Caroline, I have someone on mat leave until June. Do I need to inform her that we will be furloughing some staff? And what notice would I need to give her if I apply a furlough to her upon her return to work?
So she's starting maternity leave in June. What was the first bit of the question? Sorry.
She's
Stuart?
on maternity leave she's currently on maternity leave.
Oh, currently on maternity leave.
And she'll return in June.
Sorry, she'll return in June. Okay.
So do I need to inform her that we're furloughing some staff?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I think it's good practice that you do.
And then what notice would I need to give her if I apply a furlough to her upon her return to work?
I would say give her as much notice as you need to, but there's no requirement set out in terms of how much notice you need to give people to furlough. What some clients are doing are basically saying, here's a furlough agreement. Do you agree to it? Yes, I agree. Then you're furloughed. So literally doing it on the day. So as much notice as possible, but you don't need to worry about giving her X amount of notice just because she's on maternity leave.
Cool. And to be honest, by June we might be in a very, very different position.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
That does bring us to the end of the questions, and I'm going to give your voice a rest now, Helen. Thank you ever so much for coming along. I think it's just worth everybody being aware that things change all the time. Everything we're working off at the moment, as I said earlier, it's a page of A4. There's no more than that. So a lot of this is interpretation and understanding as we see it at the moment. I think, as I say, things are changing very, very quickly. When the legislation comes out, it could be very different. Doubt it, but it could be. Or there could be bits in there that we didn't know about. So we're doing this as we go. So just keep an eye on your inboxes, and if there's anything else that you need to know, we'll put another one of these events on. Thank you for your time today, Helen. If people want to get in touch directly with you, how do they do it?
Yep, so they can either email me, helen@thepersonnelpartnership.co.uk, or give me a call on my mobile, which is 07808 064 099.
Okay, and I will send a recording of this out later on, and I'll include those details on there as well, Helen.
Brilliant.
So
thank you.
just in case anybody wants to ask any more questions. And just finally then, a few thank yous coming through. Thanks, guys, for attending, and thank you for all your thank you messages. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and thank you again, Helen. Really appreciate this.
No problem. It's a pleasure. I hope it's been helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Cheers now.
Good. See
Goodbye,
you later.
everybody.
Bye-bye.